So, another philosophy class. We're going to be breaking down some of the similarities, some of the differences. Basically, we're going to be contrasting, hockey, basketball, and officiating. Officiating is supposed to be the rules, the enforced rules, so that the game runs smoothly and fairly, and that we get the right call at the end of the day. That's what we're trying to aim for, right? Now, I think that it's a lot harder to be a basketball referee than it is to be a hockey referee. I'm just going to say that to open up because, man, getting goaltending and getting hit, all this stuff, super fast, super real time. Even just judging a tenth of a second on the shot clock. Basketball, goaltending in basketball. It's very hard to tell, right? Very, very hard to really know exactly a little bit. Not as ubiquitous as it is in hockey. It's a little bit more night and day, you could say. That does make it easier. I've got to start with that. It's not automatically a disadvantage for basketball here, okay? But in hockey, a lot of the things can be clear and ubiquitous, like I mentioned. It can be not so difficult to discuss and to figure out. Puck over glass, that's a penalty. Cross-check to the shoulder, that's not a penalty. Hit to your head, that's a penalty. You can hit somebody in the boards, that's not a penalty. You can hit someone face first in the boards, that's a penalty. And not a whole lot of discussion on there. There was an excellent example of this in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final when Matthew Tkachuk just absolutely demolished Jack Eichel. Great hit. You should check it out. And Eichel was fine. Matthew Tkachuk probably found himself in the box for roughing. I don't think he ended up in there because of any... it had nothing to do with the hit. So basically, Matthew Tkachuk runs at Jack Eichel, hits him on the shoulder. It looks like it was very close to the head, but upon the replay, referees didn't call it a penalty. At the end of the game, Matthew Tkachuk says, that was just a clean hit to me. If you're skating up in the middle of the ice and your shoulder's down, you should expect a hit. If that were me, I got hit, I deserved it. So he's basically saying if I was in the other guy's shoes and what I did, I'm not self-righteous here. I would have the same kind of situation, and it would be all right if it happened to me. Jack Eichel called it a fair hit. Both coaches called it a fair hit. The broadcasters called it a fair hit. So we have these situations that are very easy to discuss. We're all kind of on the same page. That's why I don't think that in basketball this kind of diffusal of the situation would happen. It would extend past the game. You can definitely see players. I touched on personality of players in post-game press conferences. Like I said, it goes for a lot of extreme situations. Like if there was an altercation in a basketball game, I don't know if it's really going to end there. It might just keep going on to the post-game press conference. Both coaches, talking dirty about their opposing players. It might turn into the broadcasters on ESPN just going nuts and talking about it. Oh, it's bad for the game. And worst case scenario, it turns into a Twitter war. That's another kind of thing that we're dealing with here. And I don't know what's more petty, what's more petulant, and what's more completely unnecessary than a Twitter war about something that doesn't need to extend beyond the game. That kind of stuff does not happen in hockey, all right? The officiating makes it clear, and I think officiating has gotten better over the years as well, okay? Seldom are we arguing calls or we're dumbfounded and we're like, I don't understand that play, okay? I don't think that there's a lot of things that we can scratch our heads around. Especially one of the most controversial to me, it's been cleared up recently a lot more in hockey, where goaltender interference, if you touch the goalie and you're in the crease, the goal goes in, it's getting called back. That is it. Before you used to be able to touch him a little bit, maybe bump his shoulder, his blocker. But you cannot do any of that. Because if the puck subsequently goes in, maybe there's a time restriction, but it really is all have to happen at once. So that's really what has to happen here. So that kind of stuff, as well as the puck has to be conclusive, cross the line if you're not sure. Even just a little shade of white on the inside has to completely cross the goal line. And that's one of the crazy things about like calling penalties too. Penalties in the NHL are very important, huge. Like if you think a 5-on-3 is important, a 5-on-4 can sometimes feel that way, especially if the momentum is going all with one team. A 5-on-3 is extremely important. It's crazy how you're almost guaranteed a goal, and a goal can affect a team as much as a touchdown in football or a 10-0 run in basketball. Like it really is very important. And that's why when circumstances arise, and this is something you have to be extremely consistent on when you're an official. And it's almost the community of NHL officials because they realize the stakes. I just don't think in basketball the stakes are really matched depending on the situation, whether it's the preseason or the postseason. But in NHL, in overtime especially, in the playoffs, you'll notice that the whistles, they disappear. Now, they are a little bit more scarce in the playoffs in general, but in overtime, they almost disappear. So that is something that's really great because the NHL recognizes that the stakes are a lot higher and a power play can dramatically affect the outcome of the game. It's huge. And how do you call that, you know? It's like extremely hard to tell. It's like reversing a challenge on if the runner was out at first after the game is over at the bottom of the ninth. That happened to the Yankees recently against the White Sox. But are you going to be the referee that makes that call? And that's the situation the referees are in. It's very similar to basketball, of course. The stakes are high. And if a referee calls a foul, we can all kind of think back to that LeBron James situation in Boston when he clearly got fouled. They go to overtime and they lose. And that probably should have been a call, right? There really isn't any excuse that the referees can get except for two things. I mean, personally, like I mentioned, it's extremely hard for me to imagine being an NBA referee and calling everything, getting it right as, 99 out of 100. And then, of course, there's the situation of the stakes. If he were to call that, that would have been the game, essentially, because I'm pretty sure LeBron and the Lakers would have ended up winning. That was the last play in regulation. So with that in mind, there's another situation back in the bubble in 2020. Miami beat Milwaukee. It was game 2. This was in the bubble, so home court didn't really matter. But Miami won the game. We're up 2-0, and they won it from free throws. And it can drive a lot of sports fans crazy when they come from a hockey background like myself, or if they, football or baseball. It just kind of blows one's mind to realize that a game can be decided. A series can be decided. It has the potential if the referee calls fouls. Now, I'm not superstitious. I don't go out of my way to waste time thinking on if sports leagues and institutions are rigged because it's just a waste of my time. It appears as though calling Jimmy Butler, basically what happened was Butler shot 2 uncontested free throws. The whole principle of running into a guy and the foul is not called on you, but you're in a position, especially if your team is in the bonus, you can shoot 2 uncontested free throws. That can change the trajectory of a game and the trajectory of an entire series. That's exactly what happened in Milwaukee. They ended up getting swept. So that kind of thing is extremely disconcerting and unpalatable. It just leaves that awful residue hanging around. It's like, the only team that really cares in that situation was Butler, the Heat, and the Heat fans. But even for them, it probably left a sour taste in their mouth because, like, oh, wow, it's over just like that. So the officiating, very difficult on both sides. Obviously, I'm giving it more difficult on the NBA side. But I think just what the rules and how they're enforced is better for hockey. And it is better in hockey.